Real Agriculture presents the Bushels and Bytes podcast, brought to you by the Canadian Agri-food Automation and Intelligence Network. Sean Haney here with Real Agriculture, and it's time for the first episode of the Bushels and Bytes podcast presented by CAAIN. And we brought in a farmer that I have a very high regard for. He not only in business practices, but also his view on technology and the evaluation of what technology works for his farm. It is Kristjan Hebert, based in Saskatchewan. Hey, Kristjan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Sean. You?
Hey, really good. Hey, Kristjan, tell us about your farm.
Yeah, so kind of farm's located in right beside a little farm called Fairlight, Saskatchewan. We usually say Mooseman, so we're in the southeast corner. Grow small grains, so canola, wheat, malt, barley are our main three, and we usually have some fall rye or yellow peas in, and we've been growing pretty substantially here since 2008. Got a really good team and kind of run a consulting company called Maverick Ag to help in data, finance, risk, and technology in agriculture.
So we've got lots to chat about here, but I guess as you look at, and behind you, there's some pretty impressive pieces of machinery, some combines, and you think about the technology that is in those combines today versus what our parents even had access to. Never mind our grandparents. It's sort of hard to imagine.
Yeah, you know what? I had a good friend's grandmother passed away just 10 days ago, and she had a quote, I guess, before she passed away that she lived a pretty good life when her first ride was in a horse and buggy and her last ride was in a driverless taxi. And it got me, my grandpa passed some time ago, but I mean, if he'd have went, from his open cab threshing machine that didn't really even drive to, the new X's that we're going to have, they're pulling in live data on, what the green mass index, right, NVI was in growing season. They got 6 or 7 cameras on what's down. And I mean, we've run lots of different trials where kind of running that Harvest Smart is getting 10, 12, 13% more out of a combine in a day than even my best operators. And it's because we kind of get settled in, right? You don't push them actually as hard as the computer will. Now you have to be careful you don't push them too hard. But it's an interesting time.
How do you identify which pieces of technology or an application, how do you identify if it actually is a fit for your farm? Because you can't do everything.
No. So I mean, we do lots of on-farm trials, and then I still think people are your greatest asset. Those that work for you, but also your network. So I mean, I think I can run a high level of trust with certain people in my network for things that are working on their farm, and things that are working on ours. But for us, I mean, we're looking at just our key things: which pieces can increase yield, right, at the lowest increase in cost, which pieces can increase market price, and which pieces can increase our efficiency while at the same time managing what we call our labor, power, and machinery expense. So your capital investment can't be too high or the efficiency can't outweigh it, right? So it's just looking at those two pieces.
Do you have a line item in your budget looking at technology upgrades every year, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's all just kind of part of our capital plan, right? So we'll run kind of net present values on individual upgrades to find out if it makes sense for our operation, and then we'll obviously have to tweak on an efficiency metric, because you always got to dream how much better this can make you, right? So I mean, it's sort of in the business world. Lots of times when they invest in a new website or a new CRM system, you automatically have to make the assumptions on what your growth is. If you're going to go from 200 clients to 600 clients for that investment, it's not actually the cost that's the problem. It's the increase in revenue that's the win. So I think sometimes we forget to maybe determine what I call opportunity cost, like lost revenue, right? When we're looking at these, we just sheerly look at the investment, whether that be of sectional control on your liquid or the new sensors on the X9, but we don't look at the opportunity cost of if we don't do it.
Yeah, so if we don't do this, what are we giving up? What are we deciding to forego from a revenue perspective or cost reduction perspective or whatever it is? You mentioned you look at the net present value of a technological acquisition. So what kind do you actually put this needs to be over this internal hurdle rate, that it needs to provide us this kind of return in order for us to make this decision?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got some internal benchmarks. I mean, obviously, you can't have a return lower than what you're paying on your operating line of credit, whether that be 5, 6, or 7%. It makes fundamentally no sense, right? So that's your internal baseline in IRR. But I mean, to be honest, a lot of stuff we kind of expect a 20% rate of return. That's what I want, and it's not maybe that's the baseline in farming, but in a
Right.
lot of businesses, 20% is a pretty normal rate of return on new type things. Now, like I said to you though, the key part is you can't just put in the known expenses and then not put in here's what I assume it's going to do to revenue and output, right? I think a lot of times when people are doing NPVs, they just kind of assume everything is going to stand still and stay the same, but they get that investment and they might get a bit more efficient. Yeah, but what if
Yeah.
the efficiency means you can do 10% more acres for the exact same investment?
Right.
Like that revenue is a big number. Like that's where the return comes from.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with technology, though, if you want to use, let's say, the combine example, where there'll be like an add-on. Okay,
Yeah.
to do this, it's going to cost you $20,000, and then you're like, well, man, the machine's already over 1 million. What's another 20? And that's how you kind of justify it, and that is the reality. And I'm not being critical of that,
Nope.
but it's probably not the way you should do it. But
Yeah.
it's the way we do it.
Yeah, I think, an easy one I think is machine link or shared mapping, right? Whether that be in My John Deere or Climate View does it too. So
Yeah.
you can have 5 or 6 machines in the same field, all sharing the same GPS line, all sharing which approach to come in, all that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's easy to look at it. $1 million combine, you had $20,000 for that option or whatever the number is. But I mean, for us, we wouldn't even live without it anymore. I mean, I actually put it in my rock pickers because
Right.
the amount of efficiency gained is just astronomical, right? And then, I'll talk to a lot of people who say, yeah, but if we only have 2 machines, it's not a big deal because we'll just kind of go separate ways. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're going separate ways, like, so you're just okay with your grain cart traveling 100% more than it needs to? What,
Yeah.
like, what if they could just go side by side the whole time and be right together, right? Like, and actually, I would say the thing we're finding now is we could actually improve efficiency quite significantly with technology and with equipment in packs. And we're getting pretty close though to the time where I have to start splitting into 2 packs. And now we'll see if we can come up with some pretty good processes to keep efficiency strong when we do that. It's kind of the next hurdle.
Is there we can't get all decisions right, but is there a technology that maybe you didn't buy into when you were first exposed to it, and it took some time for it to be like, okay, yeah, now I get it. I got my head wrapped around it. It makes sense. Or maybe you didn't even do it, and you're kind of like, yeah, we should have gone that direction. You can call it
So,
technological regrets. I don't care what you call it, but anything come to mind?
I would say one is like bin sense or the AGI cables. I mean, we always had OP cables, right? And we could go plug them in with our handheld. Um, it took me a little while to fully kind of buy into that one. I mean, now it's to the point that if I rent or buy a new yard, we just go have bin sense installed in the whole yard, right? And all of our bins are coming to our phones. But if I would have jumped on it earlier, because of some of the opportunities we have for the same investment, I could probably be able to turn every fan on and off from my phone. But I balked at that part, right? A little bit. I just was a little bit unsure of the technology and that I could trust it, and it was pretty important. And so now I'm completely bought in, but I'm not kind of a first mover where you could get, to be honest, some of those pretty good deals to have a few more options than what we have. That'd be
Yeah,
that'd be one of my examples.
yeah, yeah. And what was it that changed it for you, where you're like, okay, I see it now?
I think the big thing is when we went to multiple yards. So I think what I realized in my head is I was underutilizing my other yards. So every farmer, I don't care who you are, if you're 1,000 acres or 100,000, you're farming more than one farmyard that your dad used to be in, right there. And so when we rent this land, usually there's some bins or a shop or something there. And I just realized we're having way too many conversations. Should we build another bin in the home yard? 70,000 bushel bin in the home yard, and yet I had 230,000s in one of my other yards that we just wouldn't, we'd fill and we'd empty them right away, and then we wouldn't refill them. Well, why? Well, it's just harder to check, and we got to push some snow. It's like, so I'm going to spend $2.25 a bushel to build a new bin, and I already own it, and it's sitting there doing nothing, and it's because I can't check the moisture and temperature quick enough, and we got to drive a tractor 6 miles to push the yard out.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like the excuses we were using just weren't logical, right? So how could technology embrace us to utilize I think the big thing in agriculture is how do you utilize the capital better, right? I mean, you talk
yeah.
to other businesses all the time. If you had $1 million in a manufacturing plant and it only ran for 40 days of the year, all your
Oh,
peers would laugh at you.
no kidding. Oh,
And
absolutely.
that
I think we don't talk about that enough.
And so that's farming, right? You get $1 million combine, you got a million, I say drills in today's world, right? By the time you add all the pieces together, whether it's a 500,000 or a million, I don't care if you're doing it used or new. Um, we need to talk about utilization way more. And so like it's one of our major focuses is how does technology enable utilization? Because we want capital utilized. I don't want it sitting there.
Yeah, but like how do you solve that with a combine?
Wow, the real interesting way. I mean, obviously the one is, we used to, our S series combines, I was, 3,500 acres is what I thought I could get out of them, push them to four. With the X's where it's more of an investment, but they're actually cheaper per acre for us. We can get close to 6,000 acres out of them, way more
Okay.
bushels, the 50-foot header, the more technology. So even though they're more investment, they actually cost me less per acre. Now, if I wanted to get really innovative and deal with people, but I don't, fundamentally, I don't really like people some days. Um, you'd start. I got good buddies that have a potato farm that starts in the southern states and ends in North Dakota, and
Yeah.
the planters and the combines get used more, right? So if you wanted to really think about it, that's what you do. You'd have a custom combine crew that goes down to Texas for 2 or 3 months and works its way up to end at your farm, right? And
Yeah.
if you could value the opportunity cost right, I think you could get it done.
Or what some people have tried to do is they go north, you can spread out your farm east west, better
Yeah,
to go north south, right? So you have acres that are a little bit further south or a little bit
yeah.
further north of you, and you kind of work your way geographically as well. Is there a technology that you felt you were a very early adopter and were right?
Well, a lot of people did zero till early, but I mean, I think we were the late 80s or like 91 when we started doing zero till. And when we started doing variable rate, I mean, you couldn't even get applications for on a drill. We were variable rating with our roll gator sprayer while the seeders were running in like 92, 93, 94. I'd come home after school and do all the liquid fertilizer, right? So I think those were two that we were probably pretty early on
Mm.
when it came to simpler technologies.
Yep.
And then, I mean, some of our stuff, right? Obviously, when it comes to like management planners and stuff like that. I mean, I was on the advisory board for Granular. That was before anything was cool, right? It kind of got caught up in the climate field view hub, but some of the technology we use in the office to ensure smooth communication and transferring of numbers, for sure. We'd be leaders in some of that stuff, but the actual farming, I would use sectional control and variable rate were two things that we jumped on really quickly.
From a management perspective, as the CEO of the company, do you feel that you're aggressive enough and pushing the limits of technology enough internally, or when you look at your own shop?
You know what? Yeah, I think we are to the point that probably 3 or 4 years ago I had to back off a little bit. I think we were maybe crossing into the bleeding edge because I get excited about that stuff.
Yeah.
And we kind of had to back off and I mean, you and I talked before we jumped on, like something I've done a lot better job of in the last 36 months with myself is I've got really good at saying no. So we've kind of switched technology. I'll review it, but my team will kind of come up with the business cases. And then I look at it more as an allocation of capital and a return on investment and make the assumptions on what it's going to get us. So I think we've probably backed off from the bleeding edge, more to what I'd call the leading edge of it, but really hyper focusing on what's good for us, not necessarily what's just a cool new technology, what's good for us.
From an implementation, because you have staff, and I don't care if you've got a team of 50 people working at the farm or 5 people, or maybe it's just your family,
Mhm.
all shapes and sizes. The implementation of technology is the acquisition's the easy part. Buying it, hey, write the check, put it on the operating line, whatever. Hey, now we got this. It's the implementation, the how to do we use it, and what do we get out of it. That's the part that's a lot more challenging, and probably sometimes I think a lot of farms sort of like they underestimate that part of the implementation process. Talk about some of the things that you do on your farm with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think buy-in from your whole team, so explaining why you're actually doing it. When it comes to seeding and harvest, I mean, one of the best things we ever did is probably 4 or 5 days before we start, we always have like a seeding day or a harvest day, where we go through everything from as easy as loading a prescription into the drill to how to change a boot. And it's kind of go back to that manufacturing thing. The one thing manufacturing and mines have over us is they get to do the same thing every day. So you don't have to retrain, right? They get practice every day where, we only do this stuff once a year for 20 or 40 days. So we need to retrain. I think the other big thing too is to teach the crew how important the sharing of knowledge. But I mean, I go back to kind of coaching 12-year-olds in hockey and a stat we're trying to get our hockey team to pay attention to now is how many teammates did you lift up? Not assists, not goals, not plus minus. How many good things did you do for your team today? And I say that same thing for farm teams. I mean, if your team is going to implement a new technology and one person's a rock star at it and they come out at supper time with their chest popped out, I got 40 more acres than you did on the combine because I figured this out and nobody else knows. Did they actually do anything for you? No, they didn't.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that how fast can we spread the information? So something is, a really neat one is, I don't know, most people on this podcast will have heard, when you have a John Deere monitor, something quits working, it's like a computer and you just shut it off, give it a minute, turn it back on. So if you're driving by a field and you see a John Deere tractor combine, and this is any piece of machinery, any color, but John Deere's, it'll be sitting at the side of the road. Guy will be out having a drink. I'll guarantee you he's got it shut off. He's doing a battery reset for 60 seconds. They jump back in and they go. Well, like there's a way within the monitor to trick your monitor that you've shut it off. Everything keeps working. It resets itself and away you go. But it's 5 or 6 steps, right? Well, we just videotaped it. So we actually have our own internal YouTube channel. So we put Q codes in the machines. Because even, I don't care if you're 18 or you're 60, everybody's kind of got used to phones and Q codes, right? Some people like step-by-step, written instructions. Some people like video. So we're working our way through it. We videotape it first, our best operator does, on each individual piece, because then we can go to, anybody can make a step-by-step written instruction from a video. So now we're getting to the point where there's a Q code on the window. You can snap a picture of it depending on what machine you're in. Here's how you set it. Here's some tricks on the monitor. Here's the videos. Here's the step-by-step instructions. And the big thing is you're never going to tackle them all at once, right? So we try to tackle a few key ones, every month. And over time, it's kind of cool. Like our little YouTube channel is starting to get some breadth to it. And the best part is I would say some of my 55 to 65-year-old operators maybe appreciate it more than anyone because they're great operators, but they actually don't want to phone you with a technology problem every time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny because my dad has that hesitation on, I know I'm not very good at this stuff. And I know I've asked this before. Can you just help me? And you have to take a deep breath and not be frustrated. But now the same thing's happened to me with my kids, right? It's funny how history repeats itself.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I had a few big projects that I had to get off my plate this year, but kind of started November, they got off. So, I mean, I've been pretty heavily focused on AI and Bitcoin. And I mean, if I'm at a conference to do with the two of those, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to talk to somebody with gray hair. I'm trying to find somebody 25 years old with a finance background that loves tech and finance because they know way more about it than me. And I mean, and it's starting to affect little decisions. I mean, I was just telling my COO this morning in our meeting that I have an iPhone. My wife and kids have an iPhone, but our whole business, all of our businesses run on Google Business, Google Gmail, everything.
Yeah.
Like I might actually switch to a Pixel, a new Google phone for better integration. But the real reason I'm switching isn't the integration, is that they've built their AI platform right into phones and it goes across the whole platform. So as it learns more and more, whether I'm at my computer or my phone or whatever, my vehicle, it's actually going to get better and better, right? And that's the main reason I might switch.
We're going to get back to our conversation in this episode of the Bushels and Bytes podcast. But first, I want to talk to you about the Canadian Agri-food Automation and Intelligence Network. If you like this podcast, get involved in CAAIN by going to network.cain.ca. That's network.cain.ca. Membership to CAAIN is free. Have your say on ag tech in Canada. Now back to the conversation. As somebody that's never had an iPhone, I went straight from BlackBerry to Android. I'll just tell you, that's where the cool kids hang out, Kristjan.
I know.
You will enjoy it. You will enjoy it. I'm not going to lie to you. Don't let those Apple people and the sheep that they all are, don't let them lie to you. You'll enjoy the Android over here.
I was all BlackBerry my whole life until my wife and kids got iPhone. And then I just, like I said, I like easy and I like the same. But in this case, like I said, it's actually kind of the AI revolution that will force me to move over. Because I think, we all joke that we want clones of ourselves, right? And I think
I do all the time. I did this morning, actually.
But I mean, I think as a leader, we might not be able to clone. We probably can't clone you to go do a presentation for Real Ag, right? Just like I can't clone me. That's where personality and being quick on your feet comes out. But as AI gets better, we can clone you and me at home a lot better in our office, because the one thing about having a whole bunch of content that's a positive is AI can learn about you really fast. The negative thing is we both get a bunch of haters, right? But everyone knows that. But the positive thing is, guys like you and me aren't that far away from our team typing into ChatGPT or Grok. What would Christian do or what would Sean do if they had this problem? And like
Right.
it's actually getting really close to answering right 90% of the time.
I
And
had
so,
hey, I had a farmer tell me, you know what they did they have another business outside of agriculture that they're known for. And what they
yeah,
did was they typed in the name of the company and themselves and what should we do to improve on what we're doing. And then what came out was like they were like, "Oh my God,
I know.
that's pretty bloody accurate."
Yeah. So I've always said like the only reason I care about kind of technology and data is I want to turn agriculture into blackjack. Like Mother Nature is the upside down card in blackjack. That's what
Hmm.
skews the odds. And we all know that. We can insure for that. But whether I'm in Fairlight or I'm in Ottawa or I'm in Paris, if we have a king and the dealer has a six, my team should know just go do it. Right? If we have a
Yeah.
six and the dealer has a nine, my team should know, hey, we might have to ask Christian. But AI, in my mind, is going to get us to the point where we've got blackjack and that there's enough data and technology that 90% of the time my team can make the decision without me because processes and technology have allowed them to make the decision the same as me, which means that if you delegate correctly as a leader, that you could actually be 10 times bigger and not work any harder, right? And I getting bigger and working harder shouldn't go hand in hand. And I think that's the coolest part about AI and technology is how do you farm every individual acre as good as the newest one, right? You can't get bigger and get worse, and you have to use people,
Yeah.
process, and technology to get there.
And the crazy thing is with artificial intelligence, we're really in the infancy.
Mhm.
Like that's the part that is mind-boggling to me
Yeah.
as I experimented with it all the time. We are really in the early days. And, just like we have gone a whole bunch of different directions with a lot of different technologies, whether that's, precision farming or auto steer, whatever some of the technology out there with, how we put a seed in the ground, we're really early. We're in that 1989, 1991 period. If you want to make the comparison to direct seeding, it's going
Yeah.
to be amazing where we're at. Is that the technology that you're maybe the most excited about when it comes to from a farm perspective?
Well, I mean, the interesting part is, so I'm a recovering accountant, and accountants actually don't like change in most cases, right? But I mean, accounting was probably one of the first places changed by AI, right? H&R Block have their computer they call Watson. Now, what a better place for AI when you can load in millions of tax returns and you can load in tax code. So you have all the rules and then you have all the tax returns. It can learn just astronomically fast, right? And it's changed how personal tax returns are done. And this happened 10 years ago. So, I mean that's probably the thing that excites me the most is we've been pretty focused on collecting good data on our farm, knowing that it would pay off one day, and now AI is probably the main reason that we'll see it pay off. So yeah, I mean I'm super excited about it. One is to replace myself, but then some of the interesting stuff where we're now starting to load all our soil samples in and obviously some of the new technology out there, you can now take samples to find kind of the odds of different diseases in your soil based on every area. And it used to, I would say, almost be overwhelming. Like it's almost too much information. But now, as you start uploading all this stuff, like it's going to get to the point where I think we pick not only the crop and the variety based on all the data we have on that field. And between a crop and a variety, see yield bumps of 10-20% just because you picked the right crop and the right variety to handle
Yeah.
exactly how that soil's set up. Right. So I think sometimes, we all kind of go straight to some of the movies we've seen, whether that be I, Robot or wherever, that it's just going to take over the world and think for humans, when in fact, no, humans are going to make the decision. We just need to use AI to get us all the data and narrow it down into the decidable piece quicker, right?
Yeah, yeah, like I think that's one of the mistakes that people make is that it like we jump to because probably because of the movies we
Yep.
jump to replacing humans that component of it, but it just changes the role or the lens at which the farmer or person looks at the problem you're trying to solve. I think we
Yeah,
forget
like I
that.
mean, globalization has changed our world, period, right? Whether that be access to information. I mean, why does Elon Musk own Twitter, right? Global information. But I mean, it's the same thing with AI is that if you're going to make the right decision on your farm in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Alberta, it's not that you can take a piece of information from every farm in the world on that exact decision, But I will say there's little pieces of information from every farm in the world that should affect your decision, right? I realize the soil is different in Brazil than it is here, but
Yeah.
there's also some similarities that I need to know that to be able to do what I'm doing. And just that transfer of information, it's just to boil it down to what's important.
When it comes to autonomy,
Mhm.
obviously we are really in the infancy there.
Mhm.
Are you a believer that we're gonna, those machines behind you are gonna stay that size and they're just gonna be driverless, or are you more in the camp thinking we're gonna have smaller machines and a whole bunch of them swarming? Which direction do you think we're going?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to specialty crops and vineyards and all that, I mean, I think autonomy's a no-brainer and it's going to come really quickly. For large, small grains farms, I'm still a little bit on the limb where I think autonomy can do a great job of my peripheral activities. I'd say, rock picking and harrowing and land rolling. Once we've already got the seeding map made for that year, and part of it is because our moisture profile changes so much year to year that we got to be real careful where we could drive. And then secondly, my big thing is we need to see what governments are going to do on liability to see how much autonomy is going to take over large small grain farms, right?
Mm,
If who's liable if it doesn't work and it ends up on a highway and kills somebody, because that's slowing down big companies and it's going to be really important for farms to know. Now,
yeah.
am I against it? No. Like I mean, as I said, if we told my grandpa that in today's world a lot of my operator's main job is to keep the seat switch activated, he'd have told me it was impossible. So, we're I think it's something we got to pay attention to, though, right? Because it's going to rapidly change the price of equipment and the price of used equipment as it comes in. But I mean, I've been telling Deere for years, like, why don't I have a John Deere cab in my shop? I mean, we buy enough equipment and then we have all these cameras on equipment. So the first step is I should be able to train operators all winter on my fields. We've got almost all the data. So you bring in a new operator from New Zealand or Germany or a city kid who's never been in a thing, we can we can we can train them in the exact cab with virtual reality, just like we do on Farming Simulator with the PlayStation, right? But then secondly, the first step to autonomy in my mind is, my dad needs a break. He's got to run to a funeral or something, and he's in a combine. He tells me I just jump in the cab in my office and I can run his combine in the field because I still have 5 or 6 people that can hit the kill switch if something goes wrong,
Yep.
right? And then eventually it turns into autonomous. And to me, that's the easiest first step. Like I said, my kid off Farming Simulator can come and run equipment quicker than I would have ever believed, right? The how the booms are going to turn and all that kind of stuff. Like why don't we have simulation cabs in all farm shops for training and for the first step of autonomy, of which then I think that's the step to get everybody used to it, right? And then you move
Yeah.
on.
They're using that kind of technology from a mining perspective, where the
Yeah,
miner is actually up top of the mine, but running it
yep,
from a kilometer up top.
exactly.
Yeah. Very, 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 very cool. Did they give you an answer why not though? Why aren't we doing that? Because
Yeah,
the
everyone's.
technology's
I
there.
I probably maybe haven't been high enough up the chain to get the real answer. It's fairly
Yeah.
political so far. I haven't talked to John May directly in a couple of years. If I could corner him now, when I first talked to him, he probably wasn't in the position to tell me, but he is now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty fascinating. And the other part of it too is like we're talking about whether there's an operator there. Think about a plane, right? You get in the Dreamliner, you're going to fly from Calgary to London, England. There's still pilots in that plane. Now they're
Mhm.
not hands on the yoke the entire time and
Yep.
dropping and raising and doing all the stuff. They're sitting there drinking some coffee and shooting the breeze a little bit,
Yep.
but they're still there mainly in case something goes wrong. But two, they're again looking at monitoring. They're an operator. They're not necessarily a driver or a pilot how we traditionally thought of a pilot and what their duties were. They've just changed.
Yep. And I mean, I think that's the biggest thing on farms, right? Is that one of the I always find unintended consequences are pretty interesting, especially the good ones. And one of the unintended consequences when we started running our seeders 24 hours was we had to rely on technology a lot better versus just purely awesome operators, right? We had to start them
Yeah.
at good and turn them into awesome. But what allowed us to do that was technology and data. We could have, we got 4 different drills running 24 hours, so you have a stronger operator and a one that's being training paired together, right? And you have 2 of the strongest ones at night and 2 of the strongest ones during the day. So there's where the questions go, and you use the data and technology every day to keep training. So I think that's the neat part is too many people in agriculture have always said, "Oh, I need somebody that grew up on a farm to run a drill." No, you don't. That's a lie. Not with today's technology and data
Yeah.
and your ability to train like that. to be honest, that's the big step right now that I think technology has allowed us is we can be way better at training and can bring operators, a kid in the city that was just a big fan of quads and skidoos, within a couple of years can be running fairly big equipment because they're good
Yeah.
operators and the technology is allowing you to keep a pretty good eye on it.
If we can have driverless Waymo taxis in places like LA and Phoenix, I'm pretty sure we can figure out though driverless pieces of farm equipment.
Oh yeah, I mean like I said, it's coming with all the data, right? As coverage gets better and better from a network standpoint, right? And as AI gets better and better to learn from that data. I mean, you and I both know the accident history of Waymo taxis will be less than human driven taxis, right?
Yeah,
Waymo guys aren't on their cell phone. They're not in fights with their spouse or kids.
that's true.
So I'm not saying it's not coming, right? It's just I think right now, let's make sure we take advantage of the benefits it's already bringing, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm going to have all autonomous drills. No, but use it so that you can train better. You can move people through your system faster. Like I think showing growth within your team, right? Hire a young guy, they start in a rock picker, then maybe move to the harrows, then they maybe move to the sprayer crew, then the grain cart. But you can actually show them progression in their career because you can train that much more better. Uh, More better, that's fairly English, but you can do a better job of training with technology and you have the data to show them this is working, this isn't working. You know, we use my John Deere every day just to make sure that we didn't miss a piece in a field because it
Mm.
drives me crazy, right? And with our sloughs and stuff, it's possible.
Have you seen that video? I think it's Tesla robot that's cutting hair, right? A
Yep.
lot of times we don't when we talk about robotics and agriculture and autonomy, we don't actually talk about real like robots. We talk about, the machine having a
Yep.
brain, but we don't talk about like a android human looking thing running around the farm. Do you think we'll ever see something like that, especially from like I think of like animal husbandry, like, a pen checker
Yep.
or somebody pushing cattle on the ranch. Like,
I
do
don't
you
think
think
I'd have a
that
hard
comes?
time getting my team to buy into a robot that liked cleaning bins. I think they'd
Or
buy
or
in. I think
rogue
they'd
or
train it really
roguing on
quick.
a seed farm.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you and I both know as camera technology gets better, because I mean that's really the main driving of how they see, of which then all the algorithms come in based on the picture, right? Um, like I said, I think it's going to be fun, right? And I think it's going to be more and more important. I was used to joke, I got a 93-year-old landlord I still visit with all the time, and even my dad's 63 now. I always joke that like they forget more about farming probably than I know, right? On an annual basis. But it's going to get more and more important on a daily basis to take the experience those people have and tie it to the knowledge base young people have because of technology and their comfortability with it, right? Like you throw these young kids in a cab and the monitors are just easy, right? And
Oh,
like you said,
yeah.
you throw your dad in that cab and it makes him nervous, and yet he could change every bearing, every chain, every fluid on that combine and not be nervous. So the big thing right now is I think it's never been more important to value mentorship, right? And young brains. And I
Yeah.
think those two pieces together is how businesses are going to succeed in every industry.
Do you think as technology takes more of a role here, or more of a visible role? Let's put it that way. There's a lot of technology on the farm, but a lot of times it's behind the scenes. As it takes more of a visible role, do you think we're going to have to explain it a little bit more to consumers, or how does the consumer react to this? With some of the food movements, like
Yeah.
they don't farm like they used to, kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote a blog once that old McDonald went bankrupt. He wasn't around anymore. And I think that's kind of where we're going with this, right? Is that we need to do a better job with consumers and that they want old McDonald to be alive, but they also want every piece of data they can, right? So I go to like 19 Crimes Wine, where you can take a picture of the Q code and it tells you the story way back in the day,
Hmm.
of the vineyard and the family. And so I think we're probably going to have to go to pieces like that, right? And that as we get better and better with tech, you're going to be better and better at traceability. And so you're drinking a beer while you're sitting in Europe and it came from my farm, and you can snap a picture of that Q code and see my 10 and 12-year-old running out to the John Deere combine to get in with me as I run it. So we're not hiding the technology, we're not hiding the equipment, but the data has also allowed us to tell you our story. That yeah, we're not out there with pitchforks anymore, but we're proud of that, and we're proud
Yeah.
that we grow safe and nutritious food, and we want to show you that. Um, and I think I struggle a little bit. I think our definition of farmer is actually more a political problem than it is a consumer problem. If I'm allowed to say
Yeah,
that.
go ahead. What do you, so yeah, talk about that.
Well, we've politicized farmer, right? So I bring up the StatsCan report. Like there's 186,000 farms in Canada, but 16,000 have revenue over $1 million. If you've taken any, if you look at any type of business, right, somewhere between 7 and 25% is the net profit of a business. So that means $1 million of profit should get you $70,000 to $250,000 in profit. Average family of four needs $150,000 to live on in Canada. So that that means to get to 186,000, there's a lot of hobbies. So, but that's not where your food's coming from. It's mainly coming from the 16,000. So political stats are allowing this definition of a farmer. And when I was talking to Kip Tom, I think in the US it's like $1,000 of farm revenue and you get deemed a farmer under the
Yeah,
USDA statistics.
something like
So that
that.
means that true farmers that either make at least half of their living, right, one full-time spouse on the farm, or all of their living as a true business, um, don't don't are never going to win a Democratic vote or a Democratic story because we're going to get outvote 170,000 to 16,000, right? So it slows down the story of where farming is. Like it's been changing because of technology for years, but that's not who CBC is going to have on the interview.
Yeah. Hey, Kristjan, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your perspective on technology. Thanks for being a guest today. I know you're super busy. You say no to a lot, but you said yes to the Bushels and Bytes podcast presented by CAAIN. Appreciate it.
Yep, thanks for having me on.